day nerves for the vets.
This is going to be my first time actually out on my own.
Then suddenly realised, no, it started.
Did their job description mention the highs?
It's a truth for making you better.
And the lows?
It's horrible to think that you've missed something, which maybe you could have done something about.
Or even just the day-to-day routine.
They've got out of the lamb shed and gone up the high street.
Vets in Practice. A new series starts Tuesday at 8 and continues Friday on BBC One.
When Jill met Ross on BBC Two now, it was the day that changed her life from businesswoman to farmer. The midweek National Lottery live here on BBC One after the past catches up with the present.
Welcome once again to the TW Time Machine, the show that brings you bang up to date with some of the stunning and often outlandish stories that are featured on Tomorrow's World.
Return from deep in the vaults with some classic clips that you've asked to see again.
Tonight, Time Machine tells an old score as we invite a master musician to referee the Battle of the Bassoons.
Meanwhile, in Raymond Baxter's rock and roll years, it's an annus horribilis for some and a hair-raising experience for others. But what's the year?
And what makes a grown man climb into a dustbin with a stick of dynamite? It's another explosive TW road test.
First, as usual, we start with a rather odd inquiry. Are they still using nuts to scrub the runway lights at Heathrow Airport? Asks Liz Duncan of Uxbridge. Well, Liz, here's Kieran to remind you all what on earth you're talking about.
Heathrow's runway lights aren't as bright as they should be. They're on day and night, and like any light bulb, the tungsten filaments make the precision glass lenses hot. So when they're exposed to the elements and Heathrow's particular brand of grime, it all begins to stick. And so the lights get dirtier and dirtier. Special solvents, rags, even toothbrushes were tried in vain. But then the solution was found.
The humble walnut.
This next bit's hard to believe, but it's true. They tried crushed stones. They tried olive stones. And very messy they are too. Almond shells. That wasn't a lot of help. So they moved then to walnuts. And walnut shells really did the business. So having crushed them up into small pieces, you load them into a hopper and then blast them with compressed air at the runway lights, where the combined effect of 70 pounds per square inch of pressure and the abrasive characteristics of the walnut shells themselves strip the lights of grime very effectively indeed. Well, they should. Be a bit more useful on a dark night, wouldn't it?
The sad news is that since we made that film, Heathrow has been struck by a walnut shortage.
That's right, Maggie. According to Keith Polk, Transport Services Manager at Heathrow, they switched to using olive stones, which, as Kieran clearly showed, is the cleanser of choice.
So if you have any walnuts to spare, you know to send them. Next.
Right, the man in this next story, you might shake his hand, or you might want to throttle him, because John Edwards was one of the people who made the mobile phone happen. Now, you'd think that might be enough for one lifetime, but he's not finished yet. James Burke begins the story.
From his discreetly expensive house in the country, the successful executive leaves for another day in the carpeted corridors of power and high finance. Life can be very pleasant. The only fly in the ointment is that you never get a chance to enjoy it all. You spend all day, every day, bowling around the country to high-powered meetings. And most of the time you're sitting around doing nothing, like this, wasting about £20 an hour of the company's money, and above all, out of touch. Now, you could install a GPO radio telephone, but the waiting list is as long as your arm. Or, as of a few weeks ago, you could install this.
Good morning, Mr. Burke. Your secretary called to say to remind you that the Morgan contract has to be signed today and that it is highly confidential. Do you understand, Ella?
Yes, I do, but I don't appear to have the contract with me.
That is all right, Mr. Burke. I'll get a copy through to you, Ella.
Oh, good, okay. Now, the unusual thing about that broadcast radio conversation there was that it was absolutely private.
The system was known as Ready Call, and though the messages had to go through a central switchboard, it offered one of the first mobile communication systems of the time. What made it different was that it was based on a network of small transition areas known as cells. But since James Burke first took Ready Call for a spin, things have come an awfully long way.
By today's standards, Ready Call looks like a bit of a museum piece. But although you might not have twigged it for that old James Burke clip, did in fact catch on. Big time. In fact, it began the revolution to these. Hello? I am actually a bit busy at the moment. I'll call you back.
The creator of Ready Call was John Edwards.
Well, John, here we are, driving around London making a film. This isn't the first time it's happened to you, is it?
No, in fact, I was sitting just out of shot of James Burke when we made the last one on the cellular radio service.
It was a brilliant system. What was the breakthrough?
The breakthrough was a Minister of Telecommunications who believed in it. He said, go ahead, we'll give it a go. Give it one channel, prove that it works on one channel, and then we'll look at it.
And it did work brilliantly. And though Ready Call's 360 subscribers seems insignificant against the 7 million mobile phone users there are now, it did pioneer the dividing of the network into cells, the key principle behind the phone systems we use today. So how does John feel about his contribution to the mobile revolution?
When I conduct radio masts in key positions, and I see people with mobile phones, I sometimes think I played a part in that.
Well, now, the man who changed forever the way that we communicate is about to launch his latest creation. It's a typing pool, but one with a 21st century twist.
The new venture will be known as Voice Type.
Good morning, Ms. Greaves. I'm Anita, operator 3300. How can I help you?
It's designed for the busy executive whose time is too precious to type their own letters. They'll be able to phone up a global secretarial pool wherever they are in the world. Then they dictate as normal. But here's the clever bit. As the secretary types, the text appears directly on the executive's screen. The letter can even be translated into several languages before the secretary sends it on its way.
How would you like that sent?
Boss never lifts a finger. But wouldn't it be easier if they just did their own typing? Well, not according to John. He's so convinced it's a winner, he'll take everything on it.
The family estate I inherited has gone into it. Sold the family home, put that into it.
What, everything's riding on it, and you've given up everything?
Everything.
So it has to work. Do you think we're ready for it, and do we really need it?
Well, you know, that's what they say on a mobile phone.
I suppose that's true, actually.
Who'd bet against him? He was right last time. Now a quick question. What do a squash ball warmer, a centrally heated ski pole and a fishing rod that glows in the dark have in common? Well, we back them all as winners, but how many of these have you got hidden away in your sports locker?
Whose idea was that music?
It's a squash ball warming machine.
Come on, pull yourself together.
It's supposed to warm up the air that joggers breathe in while they're running.
By practicing this, they only this racket. You can ensure your
about this. If you can't row over the obstacle, why not walk over it?
Oop, missed. I'm losing at squash again. But today I do have an excuse, because I'm playing against someone who, believe it or not, is using a square racket.
You can move the ends into 17 different positions.
And that's what the golf ball scientists have come up with. It's based on a shape called the dodecahedron. That's a 12-sided solid.
I'm going to try a spot putting. So I'm just going for a P. Centrally heated ski sticks. That's P for putts.
A squash warming machine.
Oh, come on. See? It's for night fishing. It has a light on it.
By rocking gently back and forth, I move this hydrodynamic foil up and down.
Oh, crikey. Have a backhand.
It's a squash ball warming machine.
I can only presume that that's for the young executive who doesn't have time to warm up his own ball.
If I had a sodden tumble, I could easily throttle myself.
There she is. Possibly not ideal for rough weather, but for leisure, she's great fun.
Eat your heart, 007. Good night.
Raymond Baxter will be here in a moment with his rock and roll years. But first, continuing with the sporting theme, here's a story about a man, a rugby pitch, and the helping hand of tomorrow's world.
My name is David Watts, and for as long as I can recall, rugby's been a major part of my life. From the earliest part of my childhood, ball games, sport, getting outside, doing activities, and particularly anything with the ball has been important to me.
David's passion took him on to top rugby university Loughborough, where he was made captain of the team. But the last game of his first season there was to prove disastrous.
When I was playing out of centre, running back into position, and on a rut on the ground, and turned my ankle.
He'd torn the ligaments in his ankle so badly that his doctors were worried he might always have difficulty walking. For a 19-year-old whose whole world had revolved around rugby, the future looked grim. He'd almost given up hope when Tomorrow's World reported on a pioneering operation.
I got a phone call from Father on one occasion, one evening, saying that he'd watched the television programme, watched Tomorrow's World, and there'd been an item on there which was exactly what I needed to sort my ankle out.
The film showed a new surgical technique using carbon fibres to repair damaged ligaments in the knee.
The operation to replace a damaged ligament with carbon fibre is short and relatively simple. First, the surgeon drills 2 holes in both the femur and tibia, the bones which join at the knee. Then the twisted carbon fibre is threaded through.
The theory was that the carbon fibre would act as a kind of scaffolding, helping broken ligaments grow and mesh together again. Although it was still an experimental technique, David tracked down the surgeon and underwent a similar operation to repair his ankle. Then all he could do was wait.
After the operation and coming home, there was a period of recuperation where it was testing and trying and painful, and certainly the thought that then that I might be able to play again spurred me on, and I must admit it was the bit that I suppose that kept me really going and focused. It was extremely uncomfortable, and there were a number of months before I could walk properly. Then started training, and the elation of being able to run around again was great. The ankle now causes me no problems at all. I wouldn't know it any different from the other. It's fine. Without the phone call from my father and the Tomorrow's World programme, no way I would have been playing rugby again. And I must say I'm very grateful for that opportunity.
Now, what other programme lets you relive great moments in history, groove to the beat, and flip the Tomorrow's World back catalogue all at the same time?
Yes, it's time once again for another edition of Raymond's Rock and Roll Years.
Tonight, in my rock and roll years, we go back to the year that had more downs than ups for one British family, when a certain Miss Stansfield assured us she was all woman, and on Tomorrow's World we got down at the discotheque. Year 1992. Dina Carroll with Ain't No Man. And for some, there was no man like John Major, leading the Conservative Party to its fourth consecutive win.
It's a result, I think, that has surprised one or two people, but not the Conservative Party. I'm very pleased with it, and it's nice to be back.
Up the river from Westminster, Tomorrow's World visited the development of the 90s Canary Wharf. Some thought it visionary, others weren't quite so sure.
At the moment, with worries about transport and plenty of available offices in the rest of London, there's a real possibility that they're not going to fill all this space. But considering all the technical achievements so far, it does seem a shame that some people think Canary Wharf might just turn into a white elephant.
From a new monument to an old one, where a princess went solo before the world.
For a few moments, she asked to be left entirely alone to take in the splendor of it all.
Meanwhile, on Tomorrow's World, the architecture we featured was slightly more humble.
It may look like a piece of garden furniture, but that's actually a cunning disguise. All I do is lift and separate, and hey presto, just what you always wanted, the go-anywhere dog kennel. What do you reckon then, Maisie?
And to stop that dog barking,
attached to this dog collar is a pressurized canister here containing a lemony perfume. With each bark, a microphone here activates a mechanism which squirts the lemon spray under the dog's nose, like this. Bark!
from Bark to Barcelona, where Linford and Sally picked up gold, while Tomorrow's World picked up apples.
Despite years of research, no one has yet developed an apple-picking machine that's quite as good as a human being. The latest prototype of the robot apple harvester. The picking arm shoots out in a straight line and stops when a sensor on the end tells it it's hit an apple.
Meanwhile, hitting the dance floor was Kate Bellingham at the new Quiet Disco.
Chris, if you just come around here, you see how the system works is it's much quieter when you're off the dance floor. But as soon as you step back onto it, then you get hit.
Late in the year, and tragedy strikes a national treasure.
The largest inhabited castle in the world, with some 1,000 rooms, was in the grip of a major blaze. The fire apparently started in a private chapel on the first floor of the northeast wing of the castle.
1992 is not a year on which I shall look back with undiluted pleasure. In the words of one of my more sympathetic correspondents, it has turned out to be an annus horribilis.
Cut your hair, we shall be using a vacuum cleaner.
So the idea is that by changing the length of the tubes, you can actually cut to different lengths at different places. So you could have a long at the top and a short back and sides. I have to tell you, Howard, it usually takes about an hour to do this, but I seem to have done it in about almost 45 seconds.
I think it looks very good. What does it feel like?
It feels pretty odd.
Just odd.
Very odd.
Well, I tell you, once you get home, have a look in the mirror. You'll be absolutely delighted that you came.
I wonder. Now, over the years, Tomorrow's World has featured dozens of attempts by intrepid inventors to redesign and improve musical instruments. From the piano to the didgeridoo, we've had them all. We've even had 2 different attempts to reinvent the bassoon. So we decided that Time Machine was the ideal place to stage the battle of the bassoons.
To play a bassoon, the hands must range over more than 6 feet of the instrument to the 24 note holes spread along its length. Mechanical levers help by stopping series of note holes simultaneously, but it's still very difficult to play. With the logical bassoon, all the keys are grouped together so that the hands don't travel more than 12 inches. Stopping of the note holes along the length of the bassoon is done inside with electronic circuits.
And the man behind this unusual bassoon is Professor Giles Brindley. Almost 30 years on, and it's still playing his tune.
So why did you decide to redesign the bassoon?
Well, I used to play the conventional bassoon. I didn't play it very well. I had difficulties with the finger. I hadn't a lot of time to practice. I was busy doing other things. And I decided that I could completely redesign the bassoon using electrical connections, switches worked by the fingers, electromagnets to open and close the holes, with a logic circuit, that I could make things very much simpler.
Back then, Brindley's logical bassoon was the only rival to the traditional woodwind instrument, until in the 1990s.
Now, inside here is an ordinary wooden bassoon. The important difference, though, is that these holes are arranged in a much more logical order, in a straight line down the front. Now, this is not an electrical bassoon. These wires and solenoids and so on are only there for research purposes only, so that if the position of a hole needs to be changed, then you don't have to do so by changing all the finger levers and so on, or rebuilding the whole instrument. Zoltan, it's all yours.
It sounded promising, but it was going to need a lot of work and designing over the next few years.
Well, that 1990s model is now finished, and it's here at the home of its inventor, Edgar Brown.
And you'll never believe how different it looks now.
Excellent. So what's the difference between this instrument and Professor Brindley's?
Professor Brindley redesigned the key work of the bassoon, making it much simpler to play by using electronics. This instrument, I have concentrated on the acoustics of the structure of the bassoon, of the position of the tone holes and their sizes and shapes, to give the tone quality that is desired to match the traditional instrument.
At the same time making it a little easier to play?
I would hope so, in that the keys are laid out in a more logical fashion.
So there you have it, the two contenders. Now it's time for a bit of a showdown. All we need is a player of skill and judgment to referee. And here he is, Gordon Lang, principal contrabassoonist with the Philharmonia.
So were you aware that people had redesigned the bassoon?
Yes, I was. I saw the Tomorrow's World programme in 1990 with Zoltan Lukács, and it was very interesting to see.
So do you feel a little bit intrigued about these instruments?
Well, yes, very much so, because you get used to playing the bassoon in its present form, and someone has a new idea, and you wonder, will it affect the actual sound of the instrument? Because that, I would say, is possibly the most important thing, is the sound of the instrument.
Start by fingering C an octave below mid C.
So it's back to basics for Gordon. Time for some tuition from the proud inventors. Leading off, Professor Brindley.
Yes. And then that gives you F if everything else is off, and then just go down.
And then Edgar Brown.
The sharp key is on the back here. You can work that with the right thumb. As you can see, they're spaced out more regularly.
That first finger is the next octave shift.
How do I get back to the bottom of the instrument?
Yes, that's the D. All the others closed as well.
See.
Yes, yes,
Wow.
yes.
You've had 20 years to get used to your bassoon.
Yes.
You've had about 20 minutes
Yes.
to get used to two bassoons, which are not only different from yours,
Yes.
but they're completely different to each other as well.
I know.
Good luck.
Thank you.
First up, Edgar Brown's redesigned but still manually operated bassoon. Followed by Professor Brindley's bassoon with its electronic keys.
What do you reckon then?
Very interesting. They still sound like bassoons, but obviously the key work and finger work is so different. It's quite extraordinary, really.
Are you prepared to say which one you prefer?
If you push me, I suppose I would prefer Edgar's, just because that's very similar to a bassoon, in as much as the key work is fairly standard. The same position when you play the instrument, unlike Professor Brindley's, which you play between your legs. And the angle of the crook on Professor Brindley's requires you to sort of sit up very, very uncomfortably, but I'm sure that could be modified. But I suppose Professor Edgar Brown's.
Bottom line, would you buy one?
I don't know how much they are.
Good. Well, that's that settled then. And now it's time for the Tomorrow's World request.
And this week's viewer was so keen to see his favourite clip again that he took time out from his holidays in France to record this.
When you asked for requests to show clips from past programmes, I just had to contact you. Can you please play the piece where you tested some ear defenders using a firework in a dustbin? I remember watching it with some friends in the 60s and we just fell off our chairs with laughter. It may not have been high technology, but it was certainly great television. Please show it again.
Now, these have been specially designed by explosives experts at the Ministry of Technology for people working all day in very noisy conditions, like gunnery instructors on shooting ranges or workers in heavy industrial with lots of crashes and bangs going on around them all day. These people tend, later in life, to go deaf. One of the most dramatic ways of testing anything like this is to take it inside an enclosed space and have an explosion go off inside with you. This way, the noise level is likely to reach anything up to 190 decibels, and that's enough to burst your eardrums. I'm going to try it.
Another rigorous Tomorrow's World demonstration.
And please don't try that at home. Well, sadly, that's all for this week.
Not quite, because there is just time for another magical musical moment.
Excellent. And whose turn is it to be embarrassed this week? Well, for the final item this week, the spotlight is on me, so to speak, to show my grace and prowess as a musical dancer. And you're about to witness my very first live public performance. Thank you. Well, now, believe it or not, rhythm and music isn't my forte, so over to the Tomorrow's World dancers who'll dance and create all the music you're about to hear at the same time in a new concept to light entertainment.
Next on BBC One, the National Lottery, live. Sorika Cusack has one foot in the past on BBC Two in a moment, travelling back to her childhood home near Dublin.
When a life's in danger, it's amazing what you will do.
Something's wrong! Gearing stuck!
I couldn't stop myself from getting pulled towards the ship. I got caught into a suction.
I knew time was of the essence. I had to build a steel dam. The pressure was phenomenal.
Back to the hole, we have to weld it. The engine room's flooding!
I became aware of this man could die in front of me.
It's every diver's worst nightmare.
Find out what it takes to be a hero.
I have to thank them for my life.
999 International, tomorrow 9:30, BBC One.
stage on